She left every day at exactly 5 o'clock. No goodbye, no rush, just the quiet click of her heels and the soft hum of a door closing behind her. To everyone else, she was invisible, the kind of person the world forgets by accident. But one evening, her boss, a man who built skyscrapers out of numbers, followed her, and what he found in the shadows of an old, half-broken skating rink would teach him more about love, loss, and quiet grace than all the boardrooms in his life ever could. Because sometimes, the people we overlook are the ones who still remember how to keep the lights on even after the world goes dark. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe now. Let us begin. The office sighed at 5 o'clock, just as it did every evening, printers powering down, heels tapping toward elevators, muted laughter drifting through glass. Cole Whitman sat behind his desk. The skyline of Denver reflected across his floor-to-ceiling windows. Snow had begun to fall again, soft and deliberate, dusting the streets below in thin silver. He hadn't looked up from his screen since noon. But when he finally did, the silence felt heavier. He could almost measure it. The moment Lena Brooks left the floor, her absence was precise, like someone had drawn her outline in the air and then gently erased it. She always left at exactly 5. Not 5:01, not when someone called after her, not when meetings ran long. At 5, she was gone. Her desk now sat perfectly squared, pens aligned, coffee mug rinsed, chair tucked tight under the edge. There was nothing to suggest she'd ever been there. And yet the space still carried her quiet gravity. Cole leaned back, closing the laptop. 46 years old, owner of one of the largest logistics companies in the state, a man whose calendar was booked 6 months ahead, and he couldn't explain why he suddenly cared about the schedule of his secretary. Maybe it was the stillness she left behind. Maybe it was the way the fluorescent light caught the empty corner of her desk, or maybe it was because, for the first time in weeks, he'd caught himself wondering what someone else's life looked like after the door closed. He stood, slipped into his charcoal coat, and pressed the intercom. "David, bring the car around." His driver's voice crackled back, "Right away, sir." Downstairs. The marble lobby was nearly deserted. Outside, the air had that brittle cold that bit the inside of your lungs. Cole's black Lincoln idled by the curb. He stepped in, shutting out the wind. "Follow the pale blue sedan," he said quietly. "Keep a respectful distance." David raised an eyebrow in the mirror but didn't question it. He'd worked for Cole long enough to know when to keep silent. Traffic along Spear Boulevard moved slow, tires hissing through slush. Streetlights flickered on, halos of gold in the snow. Lena's car merged south toward Commerce City, an industrial strip he hadn't driven through in years. Cole checked his watch. 5:23. She never looked back once, her taillights steady, deliberate. "Where's she headed out here?" David murmured. Cole didn't answer. The city outside shifted from downtown glass to warehouses and rusted fences. Neon signs gave way to dim porches, convenience stores, and hand-painted billboards half-peeled by wind. He could just make out her sedan turning left down a narrow street lined with shuttered shops. Then she slowed. Cole leaned forward. The car stopped beside an old skating rink, faded letters reading Commerce Ice Pavilion. The sign hung crooked, one light still flickering weakly. A thin curl of smoke rose from a side vent. "She's not going home," David said. "No," Cole murmured. "She isn't." They parked half a block away. Through the windshield, Cole watched Lena step out, coat drawn tight, a canvas bag slung over her shoulder. She glanced once up the street, just a glance, and then unlocked a side door with a key that gleamed under the street lamp. The metal door shut behind her with a hollow thud. The building swallowed her whole. Cole stared at the door. The rink had been closed for years. He remembered approving a zoning report about it. It wasn't as safe. Yet a faint light glowed now through the high, frosted windows, shifting and alive. "Want me to wait here?" David asked. Cole hesitated. Logic whispered that this was none of his business, but curiosity had already crossed the line. Yes. Keep the engine warm. He stepped out into the snow. The air smelled faintly of fuel and winter salt. His shoes crunched softly as he approached the building S side, following the thread of light bleeding through a crack under the door. He pressed his palm against the cold metal. From inside came a murmur, a woman's voice, then laughter. Several voices mingled together. Not rowdy, not wild, gentle, alive. Cole shifted to the window. The lower half was fogged, but through a clear patch he saw movement. A handful of people sat at folding tables on the rinkus bare concrete floor. Laptops glowed blue against their faces. Lena stood among them, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair loosened from the neat bun she wore at the office. She was smiling broadly, unguarded, nothing like the quiet figure behind his desk every morning. He felt his breath catch. A heavy man in a denim jacket squinted at the screen before him. "I keep hitting this thing." But at 1T opened the email. "Try the icon that looks like a little envelope," Lena said, leaning over his shoulder. "There you go. Now type your password." Slowly. The man chuckled when the message opened. "Look at that. My granddaughter sent pictures from Oregon." Lena clapped softly. "See, you did that." The group laughed. One woman wiped her eyes. Cole's chest tightened, though he couldn't say why. He hadn't realized how long it had been since he'd seen joy born from something simple. He stepped back, snow creaking beneath his soles. Inside, the lights dimmed to a warmer tone. Someone passed around paper cups. Steam rose. A heater rattled alive. Lena moved among them with an easy rhythm, adjusting a cord here, fixing a laptop there, pouring cocoa into chipped mugs. It looked like a world built entirely out of kindness, invisible to anyone who never stopped long enough to look. A gust of wind bit through his coat. He blinked snowflakes from his lashes and turned toward the car. David leaned against the hood, arms folded. "Everything all right?" Sir Cole glanced back once more. "I am not sure." As they pulled away, the rink shrank in the mirror, a dim box of light amid the dark industrial stretch. Cole watched until it disappeared completely. In the reflection, his own face looked older, tired, almost unfamiliar. He wondered how long she'd been doing this, how many nights she'd driven out after work to teach strangers how to send an email or make a call, how she managed to give so much warmth while saying so little. When the car re-entered the downtown lights, Cole spoke without turning his head. "David, dawn to mention this to anyone." "Of course, sir." Cole nodded, but his mind was still somewhere back in that rink, hearing faint echoes of laughter through steel walls. That night, he tried to work again, but the numbers blurred on the screen. Every quiet corner of his penthouse felt colder than usual for the first time in years. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was hollow. He stared out at the snow drifting past his windows and thought of the pale blue sedan, the folding tables, the warm cocoa in paper cups, and the way Lena Brooks smiled when she thought no one was watching. He didn't yet understand what had stirred inside him, but he knew one thing: tomorrow at 5 o'clock, he would look up again. The lock gave a low click when Cole turned the handle. He hadn't meant to trespass, he told himself that more than once, but the sound of voices drew him like heat on a winter night. The old rink smelled of dust, machine oil, and something faintly sweet, like cocoa and paper. His polished shoes scuffed against concrete scarred by decades of skates. The ice had been gone for years. Now rows of folding tables stretched across the floor, each one holding a flickering laptop. He paused behind a stack of unused bleachers. Maybe 20 people sat scattered around men in worn jackets, women with lined faces, one teenager with a cast on his arm. A sign taped to the wall read "Night School Free Computer Basics." Someone had drawn a smiley face next to it. At the front stood Lena Brooks. She wore the same beige sweater she'd had on that morning, sleeves pushed to her elbows. The light caught the strands of hair that had slipped free from her bun. She was explaining something about browsers, her voice calm and even. "See this," she said, pointing to the screen. "That little magnifying glass means search. You can find anything with it. A recipe, a quote, even your high school reunion." A man in a faded Broncos cap chuckled. "Why would I want to find that?" Lena laughed, the sound soft but unguarded. "Maybe to remember how far you've come." The class laughed with her. and the echo filled the cavernous rink. Cole found himself smiling before he realized it. He edged closer, keeping to the shadows. The radiators rattled faintly. Along the side wall, thermoses stood in a neat line, steam curling from their lids. One woman poured hot water into paper cups, while another set out sugar packets. Cole's gaze returned to Lena. She moved between tables, crouching beside each person, her hand sometimes resting lightly on a shoulder, steadying a trembling finger over a keyboard. Her patience was almost tangible. A man with thick glasses muttered, "It says password again." "I swear I just typed it." Lena bent over. "You did. Mr. Russell, it is just asking to confirm, so type it one more time. Same way." He followed her instruction, tongue poking slightly from the corner of his mouth in concentration. When the screen blinked and announced password confirmed, the whole table clapped. Cole glanced around. The room was lit by mismatched floor lamps. One corner still held stacks of dusty skates, like relics of another life. Above them, a banner sagged, letters faded, but still readable. "Community is everyone." Near the back, a small space heater hummed weakly, then sputtered and died. The chill crept back instantly. Without hesitation, Lena knelt and unplugged it. She rummaged through her tote bag, producing a handful of zip ties, a screwdriver, and a piece of wire. Cole's brow furrowed. What secretary carries tools? She worked quickly, twisting the wire, tightening the panel. When she plugged it back in, the heater buzzed to life again, glowing orange. Applause broke out as if she'd performed a miracle. Lena only smiled. "Let's keep it warm in here. The world's cold enough outside." That line hung in the air. Even Cole felt it. A few minutes later, the door opened and a woman in a wool hat slipped in, snow melting from her boots. "Sorry I am late," she whispered. Lena waved her over. "Come on in. Mrs. Klein, we saved you a chair." Mrs. Klein looked to be in her 70s, cheeks pink from the cold. She sat down, tugging a small phone from her pocket with the careful uncertainty of someone handling a fragile bird. "I think my granddaughter S on this face thing," she said. She moved to Florida, haven to seen her since the pandemic. Lena knelt beside her. "All right, let us try together." She connected the phone to the Rink S weak Wi-Fi, fingers moving with practiced ease. Then she guided the woman's hand. "Press this green button when I nod." Cole leaned slightly forward, breath caught. The phone chimed. For a moment, nothing happened. Just a spinning icon. Then the screen lit up. A girl of about 8 appeared, waving, her hair damp from a bath. "Grandma, Mrs. Klein gasped. Her eyes flooded instantly. "Oh, sweetheart." Her voice broke, trembling with joy and disbelief. "I can see you." Lena laughed softly. "She can see you too." "Mrs. Klein." The old woman touched the screen, as if afraid the image would vanish. Around them, the class had fallen silent, watching with reverence usually reserved for church. Cole felt his throat tighten. He turned slightly away, pretending to study a poster on the wall, but he couldn't have blocked the sound of Mrs. Klein's laughter, pure, unfiltered, something that belonged to another century. It hit him like a forgotten melody. He thought of his own mother, long gone, who used to call him every Sunday night just to ask if he was eating well. He'd always answered with one word, busy. The ache of that memory pressed behind his ribs. When the call ended, Mrs. Klein wiped her cheeks and hugged Lena. "You gave me back my girl," she whispered. Lena smiled, brushing a stray tear from her own face. "You did it yourself. I just showed you where to click." The class chuckled again, and the laughter rolled through the empty bleachers. Someone poured more cocoa. Steam curled into the air like breath made visible. Cole's phone buzzed in his pocket, an incoming call from Marla, his COO. He silenced it without looking. The noise of business suddenly felt indecent here. He stepped back farther into the shadows, unseen. The heater hummed, the voices blended. He noticed details he'd never cared about before: the scuffed edge of a table repaired with tape, the pattern of salt stains on someone's boots, the faint scent of cinnamon from the thermoses. These people weren't chasing profit margins or quarterly growth. They were trying to stay connected to a world that kept moving faster than they could catch it. And Lena was the bridge holding them steady. For years, Cole had built networks across continents, thousands of trucks, tens of thousands of employees, routes stretching coast to coast. Yet, standing here in an abandoned rink, he realized he'd forgotten what connection actually looked like. He looked at Lena again. She was helping another student now, laughing quietly as the man typed too hard and made every key click echo like gunfire. Her hand brushed his shoulder as she corrected a keystroke, and for a fleeting second, Cole felt jealous not of romance, but of the simple ease she had with the world, the way people relaxed around her, the way the cold seemed to bend in her direction. He stayed until the class began to pack up, chairs folded, thermoses capped, goodbyes exchanged. Lena moved to the front, checking the heater one last time before switching it off. The lights dimmed to a soft glow. Cole exhaled, realizing he had been holding his breath. His hands were numb, though he couldn't tell if it was from the cold or from something else. The awareness that he witnessed a kind of grace he couldn't buy, control, or quantify. He turned to leave, stepping carefully across the cracked concrete toward the door. Snow had thickened outside, drifting past the high windows. Before he pushed the door open, he looked back once more. Lena stood alone at the center of the rink, gathering stray papers. For a moment, she lifted her face toward the rafters where an old disco ball still hung, dust shimmering in its facets. She smiled to herself, small, private, radiant. Then she turned off the last light. The room fell into darkness, except for the faint amber line of the space heater cooling to black. Cole slipped out into the night, snow crunching underfoot. In the car, David glanced at him but said nothing. Cole's reflection in the window looked softened, almost fragile, as the rink-esque light disappeared behind them. He rested his hand on the door handle and whispered, half to himself, "What are you?" Lena Brooks. Outside, the snow kept falling quiet, endless, as if the city were holding its breath for an answer. By the time the last student left, it was close to 9. The rink had fallen quiet again, just the tick of cooling pipes and the shuffle of chairs against concrete. Snow pressed against the high windows like a slow tide, and the single heater hummed on, low and steady. Cole lingered by the side exit, half hidden behind an old vending machine that hadn't worked in years. He knew he should leave. He'd already trespassed once, twice if he counted tonight, but something about the stillness kept him there, like the air was holding its own kind of prayer. Lena moved through the empty space, sleeves rolled past her elbows, the soft gray fabric of her sweater clinging to her forearms. She gathered stray cups into a bag, stacked chairs, wiped crumbs from the tables. When she reached the center of the floor, she paused, then opened a storage closet and pulled out a mop bucket and an old broom. Cole frowned slightly. She wasn't the janitor here, and yet she filled the mop with steaming water, testing it with the back of her hand like someone checking a bath. She poured a dash of soap and began to clean, one lane at a time, her steps measured, the mop sliding in long, deliberate arcs that caught the light. The sound echoed shh, 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 like a heartbeat on tile. As she worked, she began to hum. The melody was faint, familiar in the way old hymns are even when you don't know their names. It floated through the cold air, steady and unself-conscious. Cole leaned against the wall, eyes closed for a moment, letting that sound wrap around him. It reminded him of the way his mother used to hum while folding laundry music made not for show, but to keep the silence kind. When she reached the far end of the rink, Lena straightened, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. She walked to a dented metal tin sitting near her tote bag. The lid gave a small squeak as she opened it. Inside, wrapped in parchment paper, were slices of banana bread, their edges slightly crisped, steam still clinging to the surface. Cole blinked. Warm. She must have baked it this morning, maybe even before dawn. She placed a slice into a napkin, then walked quietly toward the exit where Mrs. Klein was struggling into her coat. "For the road," Lena said gently, pressing the bread into her hand. still fresh. Mrs. Klein smiled through tired eyes. You're a blessing, honey. Lena shook her head. No, just awake too early. They shared a laugh, small and real, before Mrs. Klein disappeared into the snow. Lena repeated the ritual with 2 other students who had lingered, insisting they take a piece for breakfast tomorrow. When the last one left, she set the tin down, wiped her hands on her jeans, and went back to the mop. Cole watched her move beneath the string of lights that hung low across the rink. The bulbs cast halos around her as she worked one woman against a wide, echoing world. She wasn't fast, but every stroke carried intention. There was no hurry, no complaint, only care. Something in his chest tightened. He'd built towers of glass, managed thousands of employees, negotiated billion-dollar contracts, and yet what she was doing, felt more powerful than any of it. She was building something invisible but solid dignity. He stepped forward without thinking, drawn by a quiet impulse to help. His shoes clicked on the floor. The sound startled her. She turned sharply, eyes wide. In that split second, Cole hesitated, but momentum carried him another step, and his hand brushed the edge of the mop bucket. It tipped. A sheet of soapy water splashed across the concrete and over his polished Oxford shoes. He froze. She blinked at him, momentarily speechless. Then, instead of the apology he expected, Lena bit her lip and said softly, "You shouldn't be here." Her tone wasn't angry, just certain, like gravity. "I know," Cole admitted. He looked down at his soaked shoes, then up again. Wanted to see the end of it. The end of what she asked quietly. He searched for an answer and came up empty. "Finally," he said. "Whatever this is. What you do when no one's watching." Lena studied him for a moment, the mop still in her hand. Her eyes, usually reserved and professional, softened a fraction. "People like me don't get many watchers. Mr. Whitman." The use of his last name was polite, but it landed like a boundary. He nodded slowly, stepping back. The air between them was full of unsaid things, the kind that didn't need to be spoken to be felt. She wrung out the mop and turned back to her work. Cole stayed where he was, unsure if he was intruding or learning. Maybe both. The rhythmic sound of water moving across the floor resumed, slower now, as if forgiving him for interrupting. When she finished, Lena emptied the bucket in a drain near the wall, then dried her hands with a small towel she pulled from her bag. She placed the dented tin back inside, zipped it shut, and finally went to a small wooden box by the exit marked "Donations." Coins rattled softly as she opened it, mostly quarters, a few crumpled bills. Cole glanced around. The place was worn to its bones. The heater wheezed. The lights flickered. And yet it was alive, pulsing with quiet purpose. Without really thinking, he slipped a $50 bill from his wallet and folded it twice between his fingers. When Lena turned away to hang her coat, he walked up and tucked the bill into the box, under the coins. No signature, no note, just a gesture, small enough to disappear, big enough to mean something to him. He stepped outside, the door clicking shut behind him. The night air was colder than before. Across the street, the Lincoln idled, exhaust trailing upward in thin white ribbons. David was still in the driver's seat, reading something on his phone. Cole stood under the yellow glow of the street lamp, watching his breath fog. Inside, he could hear faint movement, the scrape of chairs being stacked, the low creak of the heater winding down. Then, through the small window above the door, he caught one last glimpse of Lena. She was standing alone at the edge of the rink, hands tucked into her sleeves, looking out at nothing in particular. A single strand of hair brushed her cheek. She closed her eyes for a second, as if listening to something only she could hear. Cole turned away before she could notice him. As he walked to the car, snowflakes landed on his coat and melted instantly. He opened the door, slid in, and said nothing. David started the engine. "Everything all right, sir?" "Yes," Cole said after a moment. "I think so." But when he looked out of the window, the Rink L light had dimmed to a single golden square against the dark. It reminded him of a lantern half buried in snow, fragile, persistent, impossible to ignore. And somewhere inside him, Something began to thaw. The morning light over Denver came sharp and clean, cutting through the glass walls of Whitman Logistics like a blade. The office woke in murmurs, heels on tile, printers humming, phones chirping their digital chorus. Cole stood by his window with a coffee he hadn't touched, watching flakes of snow dissolve against the pane. He'd slept little. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the dull glint of mop water, the sway of Lena S. hair as she hummed to herself, the way the heater S. orange light flickered against her hands. Something about that image had followed him home, into dreams, and through the dawn. At 8:59 she appeared, just as she always did. Lena S.'s routine was a symphony of quiet efficiency, coat off, folder stacked, desk arranged with the same precision as her typing. But this morning, when she passed his open door, Cole did something he hadn't done in 7 years of running this company. He looked up. "Good morning, Lena," he said softly. The words startled even him, the sound of her first name on his tongue, simple yet foreign, like a song he'd forgotten he knew. Lena paused mid-step. Her hands froze halfway through, placing her notebook on the desk. Then, slowly, she turned her head toward him. "Good morning, Mr. Whitman," she replied, her tone perfectly even, though a flicker of confusion passed through her eyes. He smiled faintly. "Cole," he corrected. Just Cole. That earned him the briefest curve of her lips more acknowledgement than amusement. Then she nodded once, the conversation closing as gracefully as it began. By 9:30, the conference room filled with department heads. A dozen screens glowed, charts projected, voices layered in cautious enthusiasm. Cole sat at the head of the table, listening but not hearing. His focus kept drifting 2 seats down to where Lena took notes with her usual calm precision. Her handwriting was immaculate, slanted, deliberate, without hesitation. Every word looked like it had earned its place. When someone spoke too fast, she still caught it all, her pen dancing across the page like it already knew what was coming. He envied that steadiness. And the Denver facility expansion should be complete by Q3, someone said. "Good," Cole murmured automatically. He didn't notice the pause that followed, or the sidelong glances. His attention had drifted again to the way Lena tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she leaned forward, to the faint reflection of light on her glasses. When the meeting ended, people filtered out in a blur of motion. Lena remained, collecting her notes, aligning the pens. Cole lingered too, under the pretense of reviewing figures on his tablet. "Everything all right?" she asked without looking up. "Yes," he said. Then after a pause, "You work too much." "So do you," she replied, and the corner of her mouth lifted. "Just barely." He chuckled, the sound low and unfamiliar in the quiet room. Fair point. Lena closed her notebook, clutching it to her chest. "Was there something you needed?" She caught herself, correcting softly. "Cole." He hesitated, the question slipping out before he could censor it. "How was your evening?" Her eyes flicked up, cautious but unreadable. "Uneventful," she said. That word so simple landed with quiet finality. Uneventful. As if mopping an old rink under a flickering light had been nothing at all. Cole tried to smile. "That is good." She tilted her head slightly, sensing something behind his tone. "Why do you ask? Just making conversation," he said too quickly, his voice betraying him. The air shifted. He knew it. She knew it. Her brow furrowed, but she said nothing. Instead, she gathered the meeting notes into a folder and stood. "I'll email the minutes within the hour." He nodded, relieved for the exit. But as she turned, something inside him refused to let go. "You know," he began. "There's something." She stopped. "Yes," he forced a small laugh to disguise the stumble. "I was driving last night, and I passed an old skating rink out near Commerce City. Thought of you. For some reason." The silence that followed felt colder than the snow outside. Lena didn't move. The faint pulse at her neck became visible small, fast. When she finally looked at him, her expression had changed completely. The warmth was gone, replaced by something sharper, wary. "How?" she said quietly. Do you know about that place? The room, moments ago filled with the hum of computers and shuffling papers, seemed to shrink. Cole swallowed. He hadn't meant to say it. Not aloud. He opened his mouth, but nothing coherent came out. Someone mentioned, no one mentions that rink, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Her hands tightened around the folder. It's been closed for years. Her tone was inaccusing yet, but the undercurrent was unmistakable, she knew, or at least she suspected. The air between them thickened with the weight of unspoken truth. Cole rose slowly, palms out, as if approaching a wild animal he didn't want to scare. Lena, he said. I didn't mean did you follow me? The question landed like a pin dropped in glass. He inhaled, steady but shallow. Not in the way you think. Her eyes flickered with hurt, quick, fleeting, but real. In what way should I think? Then he stepped closer, careful, deliberate. I was curious. You left every day at the same time. You never talked to anyone. And he exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. I don't know. I wanted to understand. She stared at him, her jaw tightening. Understand why the quiet mattered so much, he said softly. For a moment, neither spoke. The office clock ticked faintly on the wall. Outside, the snow brightened in the morning sun, as if mocking the frost between them. Finally, Lena nodded once, her expression shuddering. I see. He wanted to apologize, to explain that it hadn't been malicious, that watching her had made him feel human again. But her eyes had already cooled, professionalism sliding back into place like armor. I should get these notes typed, she said, voice steady. You'll have them shortly. He didn't try to stop her. When the door closed behind her, the room seemed to lose its color. Cole stood for a long moment, staring at the empty chair she had occupied, the faint indentation on the table where her notebook had rested. He ran a hand through his hair and let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, though there was no humor in it. Well done, Whitman, he muttered to himself. You just scared the only person in this building who still has a soul. Outside, Lena walked down the hallway, her steps slower than usual. She held the folder tight to her chest, her heart thudding against the paper. She didn't look back, but in her reflection on the glass wall, for a brief second, she saw him standing alone, motionless, watching her go. Neither knew what to do with the silence that followed. The storm outside had cleared by afternoon, but the air inside Whitman Logistics felt heavier than snow. Conversations thinned when Cole walked through the corridor. Though no one knew why, he carried the weight of his own mistake like a stone in his chest. For most of the day, Lena had been invisible, not absent, just harder to find. Her desk was neat, her tasks completed, her replies clipped and formal. No warmth, no laughter, no hum of quiet grace, just silence, efficient and absolute. By evening, when most of the office had emptied, Cole stood at his door, watching her through the glass. She was cleaning out the coffee pot, the same ritual she did every night before leaving. Only this time, there was no calm rhythm in her movements. Everything was sharper, controlled. He took a deep breath and stepped out. Lena. She turned, expression unreadable. Yes, Mr. Whitman. The formality cut deeper than he expected. Do you have a minute? Her eyes flicked to the clock. 5:02. She hesitated, then nodded once. 1. He gestured toward the small break room down the hall. It was quiet there, lit only by the low blue hum of a soda machine and the scent of burnt coffee lingering in the air. She sat at one end of the table, notebook still in her hands like armor. He sat opposite her, unsure where to begin. The machine buzzed softly between them. I owe you an apology, Cole said finally. Lena didn't flinch. For what exactly? He clasped his hands, studying the veins along his knuckles. For following you? There it was. No more hiding. The truth landed in the space between them, small but heavy. Lena didn't speak at first. She just looked at him, not angry, not shocked, just tired. Why, she asked quietly. I don't know, he said. At least, not in a way that sounds reasonable. She tilted her head slightly. Try unreasonable. Then, Cole met her eyes. Because you were quiet. Because everyone else in this building wants to be seen, and you didn't. And that made me wonder what you were hiding, or maybe what you were protecting. I wanted to understand the kind of peace that doesn't need applause. Lena exhaled slowly, her gaze dropping to the table. So, you invaded it. He nodded. I did, and I am sorry. Silence again, but not the easy kind she carried with her. This silence had edges. Did you think I was doing something wrong, she asked. No, he said quickly. Not once. I wasn't as suspicious. Lena. I was. He searched for the word. Moved. Something flickered in her eyes, a mix of surprise and disbelief. Moved. He nodded. Watching you help those people. The way you spoke to them. The way they looked at you. It was like seeing something I forgot the world could be. Lena S.'s voice softened, but only slightly. You could be asked. I should have, he said. The soda machine hissed as if agreeing. The fluorescent light above them flickered once, washing the room in alternating cold and warm tones. Lena S.'s posture shifted a small exhale, shoulders relaxing just enough to show how long she'd been holding them tight. Do you know what respect is, Mr. Whitman? He managed a faint smile. I am learning. It's letting people choose what you know about them, she said, her tone gentle but unwavering. You took that choice from me. He nodded, his throat dry. You're right. For a moment, they sat in the kind of quiet that feels like a doorway, one that might open to forgiveness or close for good. Lena looked down at her hands, fingers tracing the edge of her notebook. Then she tore a small square from a pad of sticky notes, scribbled something quickly, and slid it across the table. Cole glanced down. The handwriting was neat, angled just like her meeting notes. Saturday, 4 p.m. If you want to understand, wear old shoes. He looked up, confused. What is this, an invitation, she said, standing. You want to understand me, not the version that works behind a desk. Fine, but you can do that from a glass office. Her voice wasn't angry anymore, just resolute. Where, he asked. You'll see, she said. Then, with a trace of something almost like humor, she added, Dante, bring your driver, or those shoes. He glanced at his polished leather Oxfords and managed a breath of laughter. Noted. Lena picked up her notebook and moved toward the door. She paused there, one hand on the handle, half turned toward him. For the first time that day, her expression softened, not forgiveness exactly, but something that might someday grow into it. You meant no harm, she said quietly, but meaning well and doing right are not the same thing. He nodded. I'll remember that. Her gaze lingered for a heartbeat longer, and then she left, the door closing behind her with a soft, final click. Cole sat there, staring at the sticky note still on the table. The ink gleamed faintly under the fluorescent light. He traced the words with his thumb, committing them to memory. Saturday, 4 p.m. He slipped the note into his wallet, next to a photograph of his late mother he hadn't looked at in years. Then he leaned back, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Outside the window, the sun had already dipped behind the Rockies, painting the sky in bruised gold. Somewhere in the distance, he could almost hear the faint echo of a hymn, or maybe just his guilt pretending to be music. Either way, it followed him all the way home. The sky over Denver that Saturday was the color of brushed steel, soft and uncertain. Cole Whitman stood in front of the old Commerce City rink again, but this time not in his tailored coat or polished shoes. He wore faded jeans, a flannel shirt that hadn't seen daylight in years, and sneakers that still had a department store tag hidden under the sole. He'd actually gone out that morning to buy them his first pair of old shoes. He wasn't sure what to expect, only that Lena had told him to come ready to work. He looked at the time. 3:57 p.m. For once, he was early. The wind carried the faint smell of motor oil and cinnamon from a bakery down the block. He took a breath and knocked on the metal side door. It opened a moment later, and Lena stood there, wearing a navy sweatshirt and jeans, her hair in a loose braid that made her look younger, softer, but her eyes still carried that quiet watchfulness. "You came," she said simply. "You invited me," he replied, half smiling. "I also doubted you to show. I nearly didn't," he admitted. Had a minor crisis about whether flannel counts as casual or desperate. That earned a small laugh, quick, genuine, and gone almost too soon. "You all do," she said, stepping aside. The rink looked different in daylight. The cold gray floor gleamed faintly under the streaks left by last night's mop. Folding tables leaned against one wall, and a dozen metal chairs were stacked neatly nearby. A portable speaker sat on a stool, humming out soft country music. Lena handed him a pair of gloves. "We are setting up for the evening class. The regulars will be here around 5. "Got it," he said, pulling them on. "What do you need me to do?" "Start with those chairs," she said, pointing to the corner. 3 rows, 6 per row. Try to make them straight. He grinned faintly. "I run a company that moves 12,000 containers a week, but sure straight chairs might kill me. Consider it character development," she said, already walking away to unpack cables. Cole spent the next 15 minutes arranging the chairs, and it took him 2 tries to get them evenly spaced. The floor markings from the old hockey lines didn't help. Every time he stepped back to check, they looked slightly crooked. By the time Lena came over, his forehead had a sheen of sweat. "Not bad," she said, tilting her head. "They lean a little to the left, but so do I." He chuckled, relieved. "You're harder to please than the board of directors." "Good," she said. "We keep higher standards." He followed her next to the storage room, where she was uncoiling a tangle of orange extension cords. She demonstrated how to wrap them properly so they wouldn't knot. When he tried, the cords slipped and snapped against his wrist. "Ow." She smiled, amused. "You're learning. Feels like punishment. Then you're doing it right." The music in the background changed to something upbeat, an old Willie Nelson track. Lena hummed along while she taped cords to the floor. Cole found himself watching the easy way she moved, focused, unself-conscious. It reminded him of the first time he saw her teaching, except now there was no glass wall between them. After the cords came the cleaning. Lena pulled out 2 plastic buckets and handed him one. Ever mopped before she asked. "I'm sure I've seen it done," he said dryly. She rolled her eyes. "All right, rookie, 2 buckets, 1 for soap, 1 for rinse. You don't just push the dirt around. You take it with you." He nodded solemnly, as if she were teaching him corporate strategy. 2-bucket method, revolutionary. "Mock all you want," she said, dipping her mop. "It asks about rhythm, not power. You'll figure it out." He tried to imitate her smooth motion, but ended up flicking water onto his own jeans. "Graceful," she teased. "I was a finance major," he replied. "Manual labor wasn't part of the curriculum." She laughed, and it wasn't polite this time. It was real, round, the kind that filled a space with warmth. The sound echoed through the empty rink, mixing with the scent of lemon soap and the faint hum of the heater. For a while, they worked side by side. She moved efficiently, wiping along the walls and corners, while Cole focused on keeping up, his arms aching in ways spreadsheets never prepared him for. A small blister bloomed at the base of his thumb, and when he flexed his hand, Lena noticed. "Blister already," she said, smiling gently. "I am out of shape," he admitted. "No," she said softly. "You're just not used to slow work." "That's different." The remark lingered between them, simple, but true. Cole looked at her, realizing she'd read him perfectly again. By the time they finished, the place smelled clean and new. Cole leaned on his mop handle, catching his breath. "Do we pass inspection?" "Barely," she said, but the teasing in her voice softened the words. "You did good." Cole. He didn't miss the shift his name. Spoken without distance. It felt like sunlight breaking through a cloudy morning. The front door creaked open then, and Lena turned. "You're early," she called out. A man stepped in, tall but thin, wearing a worn army jacket and carrying a folded metal chair under one arm. He walked with a noticeable limp, his right leg stiff. "Habit," he said with a grin. "You told me once if I am on time, I am late." Still quoting me, Lena said, smiling, "Cole, this is my brother, Evan." Cole straightened, wiping his hand before extending it. "Good to meet you." Evan shook his hand firmly, his grip steady despite a faint tremor. "The CEO himself. Didn't expect to see you out here." "Didn't expect to be here," Cole said honestly. Evan chuckled. "That makes two of us." He dropped the chair and gestured at the space. "She got you on mop duty, yet graduated about 5 minutes ago. Then you've already survived the worst of it." Lena rolled her eyes. "Ignore him. He still owes me for the time he flooded half the floor." "Sabotage by enthusiasm," Evan said. "Deadpan." Cole laughed, surprised by how natural it felt. The tension from the past week melted a little in that moment between the jokes, the soap smell, the scrape of metal chairs. It wasn't a forgiveness exactly, but it was the start of something close to it permission to begin again. As they finished setting up, Lena handed Cole a folded towel. "For your hands," she said softly. "Blisters get worse when you pretend they don't exist." He nodded, looking at her for a long second. "You could say that about a lot of things." Her gaze held his steady. "Unreadable, but not closed." "Maybe I just did." Evan clapped his hands once. "All right, philosophers. Time to brew coffee before the crowd gets here." Lena smiled, shaking her head. "You see why I didn't give him keys?" Cole grinned. "He seems like trouble." "The best kind," she said, her tone affectionate. As the three of them worked, the rink began to glow under the amber lights, voices blending with the hiss of the coffee pot. And for the first time in years, Cole felt something close to peace, not in the control of his empire, but in the quiet humility of mopping a floor beside someone who saw the world differently. When Lena caught him glancing her way again, she raised an eyebrow. "Something on your mind, Mr. Whitman." He smiled. "Nothing worth ruining the quiet for." She nodded once, approving. "Then you are finally learning." Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft and slow, tapping gently against the rink-soled glass windows as if the world itself was listening. By the time Monday rolled around, the warmth of Saturday's laughter had already begun to fade. Cole's week exploded into numbers, calls, and deadlines, the usual blur that defined his life, but this time, it all felt slightly off. The meetings seemed louder, the deals more hollow. He kept glancing at his phone, half expecting a text from Lena, though she was the type to reach out first. On Wednesday afternoon, a message from her did appear, but it wasn't what he expected. "Can you stop by the rink after work? Pastor Ruth wants to show you something." No context, no emojis, just that. Cole arrived a little after 6. The snow had melted into slush, and the parking lot was nearly empty. Inside, the rink smelled of lemon cleaner and faint cinnamon comforting. Familiar, but something was different. The folding tables were cluttered with papers instead of laptops. Lena stood near the center, her coat still on, talking in a low, tight voice to a gray-haired woman with glasses sliding down her nose. When she saw Cole, Lena gestured him over. "Cole, this is Pastor Ruth. She runs the community programs here." Pastor Ruth smiled weakly, her voice trembling. "Mr. Whitman, thank you for coming. I'm afraid we're in a bit of a bind." Cole nodded, setting his briefcase down. "What kind of bind?" She handed him a manila envelope. Inside were 3 letters typed, stamped, official. The first line made his stomach sink. Notice of rent adjustment and payment due. Effective immediately. Rent increase 40%. Outstanding back fees 3 months. Payment in cash. Due in 14 days. Cole looked up sharply. 40%. That's insane. Pastor Ruth exhaled, pressing a shaking hand against her chest. "Ray Dugan. He's owned this building since the 90s. Always gave us fair terms before. But last week he said costs are up. Insurance, property tax, you name it. And then he dropped this on us." "Back fees," Cole asked. "You've always paid." "Right." "Every month," Lena said firmly. "I write the checks myself. He even thanked us at Christmas." Cole frowned, flipping through the other papers. Cash only. That's not rent, that's extortion. Pastor Ruth nodded grimly. He said a developer has been making offers for this block. Parking lot plans. Said if we can match the expected value, he'll terminate our lease. Cole's chest tightened. He'd heard that kind of language before in boardrooms, in deals he'd signed without looking twice. Lena crossed her arms. We're going to fight it. Bake sale, community outreach, donation drives. We can make it. Evan's voice came from the corner, where he was tightening a bolt on a folding table leg. And I'll do night security, just in case Ray or his friends try anything funny. Cole turned toward him. Friends. Evan shrugged, eyes dark. Guy S. got a reputation, takes cash, gives favors. The usual. The silence stretched, the only sound the buzz of the old heater. Cole's mind was already calculating numbers, connections, escape routes. Let me make a few calls. He said, maybe I can talk to him. Lena looked at him skeptically. You think he'll listen? He'll listen, Cole said quietly. He just doesn't know it yet. That night, Cole sat alone in his office, the city glittering below him like a field of broken glass. He'd spent hours combing through property records, searching for the name Ray Dugan. What he found made the bottom drop out of his stomach. The Rink S title wasn't held directly under Dugan S name anymore. 2 years ago, it had transferred to Pine River Holdings, LLC, a shell company that handled small commercial properties across the state. He clicked deeper one document, then another, and froze when he saw the next name, Pine River Holdings subsidiary of Northline Capital, his own company. He scrolled through the digital files again, heart pounding. Somewhere in the paper flood of quarterly approvals, his signature appeared stamped automatically by his executive office. It was dated 5 months ago. The acquisition had gone through quietly as part of a land banking initiative proposed by his COO's real estate team. They'd never brought up a skating rink. They'd used an address code COM47B hidden among dozens of other small properties. And now, someone under his own banner was helping Dugan clear the site for redevelopment. The rink. Lena S. Rink. Cole leaned back, the air leaving his lungs in a slow, stunned exhale. He wasn't just part of the problem. He was the problem. The next evening, he drove back to the rink. The parking lot lights flickered to life as he pulled in. Inside, Lena was standing on a ladder, hanging hand-painted posters for a fundraiser. Her hands were speckled with blue paint, her braid loose from a long day. When she saw him, she smiled wearily. You're just in time. We've erased $90 and 3 pies. Cole didn't smile back. Lena, we need to talk. Her hand froze mid-motion. What's wrong? He hesitated, watching the way the light reflected off the half-dry poster that read, Save Our Center. The landlord, he said slowly, is not just him. What do you mean? He took a breath. The holding company that owns this building, Pine River Holdings, it is a subsidiary of Northline Capital. Her brow furrowed. Northline, your company. He nodded once. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she laughed softly one sharp, disbelieving note. You were kidding. I wish I were. The silence stretched. The heater kicked on with a rattle. So, she said, voice quiet but cutting. The man who follows me to a community center to understand my world turns out to own the ground under it. Not directly, he said quickly. It was a shell purchase. I didn't know, she cut him off, eyes shining but steady. But you do now. He met her gaze. And I'll fix it. Lena crossed her arms, the distance between them widening. You can teach us fix things by writing checks. Cole, that's what people like Ray Dugan count on. I am not him, Cole said. Then prove it, she replied, her voice trembling just slightly. He wanted to reach for her, to say something that would bridge the impossible gap between guilt and intention. But words felt small here. Everything did. Evan entered from the side door, wiping his hands on a rag. We good, he asked, sensing the tension. Lena didn't look away from Cole. We will be, she said softly. If he means what he says. Cole nodded once. I do. Evan studied him for a long moment, then extended a hand. Then let us start by keeping the lights on. Cole shook it, feeling the grit of calluses against his palm, a reminder of everything he didn't yet understand. Outside, through the frosted glass, the night pressed close. The rink glowed from within a small island of light in a darkening world, and for the first time, Cole understood what it meant to be haunted by something you helped build. Cole Whitman had fought harder battles than this at least. That's what he told himself as the elevator carried him up 43 floors to the North Line Executive Suite. He'd negotiated international freight tariffs, steered mergers through hostile committees, and once convinced a senator to rewrite a tax clause mid-flight between Chicago and D.C. But this, a single community rink sitting on a piece of underdeveloped land, felt heavier than all of it. He wasn't sure why. When the elevator doors slid open, Marla Jensen was already waiting in his office, tablet in hand, his chief operating officer sharp as cut glass, her hair pulled back like a weapon. She didn't bother with greetings. "Ray Dugan called me," she said flatly. "Yes, nervous you're asking questions." Cole set his briefcase down. "I am not asking. I am correcting." Marla raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "About what, the Commerce City property? The old rink. I want the eviction notice withdrawn." She gave a humorless laugh. "You mean Com 47B. That's not your department anymore. Cole, it's under the Capital Expansion Fund. We're converting the whole block into logistics storage by Q3. I read the report," he said. "I also saw the lease community programs, seniors, veterans groups. That wasn't part of the plan." Marla sighed, like a teacher humoring a student. "Look, I get it. You saw some heartfelt little charity story, and now you feel bad. But this deal's too far along. The board approved it months ago. We answer to shareholders, not skating lessons." "It is not skating lessons," he said evenly. "It is people." Marla tilted her head. "People don't build net worth. Real estate does." The air between them thickened. Cole looked at her, the cold competence, the same kind of armor he used to wear. He wondered when he'd stop noticing how cruel it sounded. "I am pausing the acquisition," he said. "No, you're not." Her voice was calm. "Certain. You can unilaterally override a board vote. If you do, it's insubordination, and you all tank investor confidence. You've built your reputation on precision." Cole donned to throw that away over sentimentality. He stared at her, then turned to the window. Downtown Denver sprawled below clean lines, polished towers, each one built on decisions that had once sounded just like this. "Sentimentality," he murmured. "You mean conscience." Marla shrugged. "Call it whatever helps you sleep." When she left, he sat at his desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The cursor blinked in front of a blank internal memo draft subject temporary moratorium on community-adjacent acquisitions from CEO S office to Northline Legal and Capital Development. He typed 4 sentences explaining that certain properties were under ethical review. He even used the right language: corporate responsibility, reputational stewardship, words that sounded good in press releases but rarely meant anything. Then he stopped. He reread it once, twice. The tone was perfect measured, impersonal, designed to cause the least possible disturbance, and that was exactly the problem. With a long exhale, he hit delete. The screen went blank again. If he was going to fix this, it couldn't be with memos. It had to be with something real. The following evening, Lena S. Night School was already in session when the rink door opened. A gust of cold air swept through, followed by Cole carrying 2 cardboard boxes and a small leather folder tucked under his arm. Heads turned. The students' warehouse workers, retirees, a few teenagers watched as he crossed the floor awkwardly, setting the boxes on a table. "Mr. Whitman," Pastor Ruth called, her voice uncertain. "You row back." Cole smiled faintly. "I brought something." He opened the first box. Inside were 8 brand-new Chromebooks, each wrapped in sleek silver plastic. The second box held wireless mice, headphones, and a stack of software access cards. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone started clapping. Cole raised a hand quickly, embarrassed. "It's just equipment," he said. "You shouldn't have to teach on machines that can barely start." Lena, standing by the whiteboard, Hadn't moved. Her face was still. And this, he added, setting the leather folder on the table, is a lawyer S card, property specialist. He is ready to file a motion to freeze the lease until ownership terms are reviewed. Pro bono. Evan whistled low. That's quite an entrance. Cole smiled weakly. I thought it might help. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Lena walked forward, each step measured. She looked at the boxes, at the lawyer S card, and finally at him. You didn't have to do this, she said quietly. I wanted to. He replied. You deserve a fair shot. She held his gaze, and something unreadable passed between them, half gratitude, half ache. We asked for time, not rescue. The words landed harder than he expected. Cole blinked. This isn't tea about rescue. Isn't it? She asked softly. You walked in here with gifts, lawyers, and power. That's what people like you do. You fix the problem, then decide who gets the credit. But this place, it's not a problem. It's our home. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Around them, the class had gone quiet, pretending to work, but listening to every word. I just wanted to help, he said. And I believe you, Lena replied. But help isn't the same as taking over. She turned to Pastor Ruth, her tone gentler. We'll accept the laptops, but the lawyer we'll decide as a group, together. Pastor Ruth nodded, understanding. Evan shifted, uncomfortable but silent. Cole stood there, unsure what to do with his hands. I didn't mean to overstep, he said finally. Lena's eyes softened just a little. I know. You're used to fixing things from the top. Down here, it works different. Her voice wasn't cold, just calm, like she was teaching him something instead of punishing him for not knowing it. He nodded slowly. Then teach me. She smiled faintly. That's what Saturdays are for. The tension eased, replaced by a ripple of quiet laughter. Cole exhaled, realizing he'd been holding his breath since he walked in. He looked around the room, the students tapping keys on their new Chromebooks, the soft hum of the heater, the scent of cocoa mixing with dust. The world he'd built upstairs ran on profit margins. This one ran on heartbeats. Maybe both kinds of power mattered, but only one made life feel human. As the class went on, he stayed in the back, observing, not leading, not directing, just listening. When Lena passed him a mug of cocoa, their fingers brushed briefly. It was the smallest gesture, yet it felt like forgiveness trying to find its footing. When he finally left, the snow had started again. Fine. Silvery flakes swirling under the streetlights. He stood by his car for a moment, looking back through the rink-high windows. Inside, Lena was laughing with Evan about something he couldn't hear. The light around them looked golden, alive. He realized then that he'd spent years mistaking control for strength. But what he saw in that old rink, the messy, stubborn, imperfect power of people choosing each other, that was courage. He wanted to be part of it. He just didn't know how yet. The night had frozen to glass. Cole stood by his car, watching his breath rise in faint clouds beneath the street lamp. The rink behind him was dark now, its windows blank squares against the pale February sky. The parking lot is gravel, cracked under his shoes, brittle with frost. Lena stepped out a few minutes later, pulling her hood tighter, her cheeks red from the cold. She saw him but didn't speak at first, just walked to her pale blue sedan, keys jingling softly. Then she stopped halfway, turned, and said, You didn't have to wait. I know, he replied, but I wanted to. The silence between them was soft but heavy. Their breath plumed in the air, two separate ghosts briefly merging before fading away. Lena leaned against the side of her car, arms crossed. You think every problem can be fixed if you just stay long enough. Don't you? He almost smiled. Guilty. She studied him for a moment, then looked toward the rink. I wasn't fair to you earlier. About the Chromebooks. You were trying to help. She trailed off, shaking her head. Sometimes help feels like pity, and I've had enough of that for a lifetime. He took a step closer. You don't owe me an explanation. I know. Her breath fogged the air, lingered, vanished. But maybe you deserve one anyway. The way she said it, Quiet, steady, made him straighten, as if preparing for something sacred. I wasn't always this invisible, she began. I used to think being loud made people listen. Turns out, it just made them leave faster. Cole didn't move. He just listened. My mom disappeared when I was 15. Lena said, walked out one morning to buy milk and never came back. No note, no call, just gone. My dad started drinking. First beer, then bourbon, then whatever didn't need a label. Evan was 19 by then. He enlisted a month later. Said it was the only way to get away without feeling guilty. Her voice stayed calm, but her hands fidgeted with her car keys. Click, twist, pause. I kept the lights on. She continued, worked at a laundromat, filed taxes at night for a local accountant who didn't care I was underage as long as I was good at math. I got my diploma in between double shifts. I don't even remember prom. But I remember the smell of bleach on my hands and the sound of the washing machines. It was the only constant thing in that house. Cole swallowed, his throat tight. The parking lot felt smaller, the air thinner. One night, she said softly, I was trying to balance our checkbook back when that was still a thing, and I couldn't figure out the decimals. I walked to the public library to use their computer, and this woman, Mrs. Talbot, she must have been in her 60s, showed me how to use Excel. She stayed until closing, even though her husband was waiting in the car. She said, you'll get it. You just need someone patient enough to show you once. Lena S. lips curved faintly. She was right. I learned. Got better. Promised her I'd pay it forward someday. She looked up, meeting his eyes. That's what the rink is for me. Paying it forward. It's not charity. It is survival turned inside out. Cole wanted to say anything, but the words tangled. He'd sat in too many meetings where people like her were just statistics, underbanked or disadvantaged. But now, standing in that parking lot, all he could think was how human resilience could sound so heartbreakingly quiet. You carry all that, he said finally, his breath trembling in the cold, and still have room for others. Lena gave a small, crooked smile. You learn to carry light things carefully when the heavy stuff never goes away. The sentence lingered like a prayer neither of them knew how to end. She pushed away from her car. Your turn. He blinked. My turn. You listen well, Cole, she said gently. But people who listen that well usually have something they're not saying. He hesitated, then nodded once, slowly. Fair enough. He looked past her, toward the empty highway where snow flurries drifted in the glow of the traffic lights. I was married, he said finally. Her name was Margaret. Lena S.'s expression softened. Though she didn't speak, she was a museum curator. He continued. Loved color, not art. Really color. She said it changed how the world breathed. I didn't understand that until she got sick. His voice faltered, but he didn't stop. Ovarian cancer. Caught too late. 18 months from diagnosis to silence. The words came out flat at first, then broke at the edges. We had tickets to a Monet exhibit in Chicago. She'd circled the date on the calendar, kept the email printed on the fridge, but by then, she couldn't walk without help. And he swallowed. I went alone anyway. I thought maybe taking pictures would make her feel like she'd been there. She died 2 weeks later. The wind rustled, low and endless. Lena S.'s eyes glistened, but she said nothing. Cole looked down, a hollow laugh catching in his throat. I still have the tickets. 2 of them. Never could throw the second one away. It's ridiculous, I know. It's not ridiculous, she said softly. It's a love, trying to keep breathing. He nodded, not trusting his voice. The house, he said after a moment, still smells like her perfume. I never repainted. I tried once, but it felt like erasing her. So I just let it stay quiet. Lena S.'s gaze met his, steady and kind. And now you can tell if you live there, or just visit the silence. He looked up sharply, startled by the precision of it. Exactly. They stood there in the frozen air, 2 stories unfurled, 2 lives threaded briefly together by the kind of honesty that leaves no winners, only understanding. Lena rubbed her hands for warmth, her voice low. You know what's funny? People think silence is empty, but it's full. Isn't it full of everything you couldn't say when you had the chance? Yeah, he said. It's full. For a long time, neither moved. The cold stung their cheeks. Their breaths mingled in the lamplight, almost touching, never crossing. Then Lena glanced toward the rink again. We've both lost things that Donny come back. Haven't we? He nodded. Then maybe that's why we see each other, she said. The quiet recognizes its own. Cole looked at her. The words caught somewhere between gratitude and grief. He wanted to reach out to touch her shoulder, her sleeve, but stopped himself. The space between them wasn't ready to close yet. Instead, he said quietly, "Let me drive you home." She smiled faintly. "I'll follow you out." And as their two cars pulled away, headlights sweeping through the cold night, the snow began again, slow, relentless, each flake like a whisper of everything they'd finally begun to say. It began with the rattle of a truck engine and the crunch of tires over slush. By the time Cole's sedan pulled into the rink parking lot, the sky had turned the color of tarnished copper, the sun already sinking behind the warehouses. The seniors from night school stood in a small cluster on the sidewalk, bundled in coats and scarves. Lunch sacks clutched against their chests like fragile shields. Pastor Ruth was pacing near the entrance, cell phone pressed to her ear. Evan stood beside her, fists jammed into his jacket pockets, his limp more noticeable when he was angry. And by the door, Ray Dugan. He was shorter than Cole expected, thick through the shoulders, his belly pushing against a plaid shirt that strained at the buttons. Two men stood behind him, one holding a drill, the other a toolbox. The old brass lock on the rink-esque double doors lay broken on the concrete. "What the hell is this?" Evan barked, stepping forward. Ray didn't flinch. "Legal procedure. Non-payment of fees. This place is closed." Lena emerged from the group, calm but pale. "You can just show up and lock us out. We have 14 days. "Not anymore," Ray said, waving a paper in her face. "Revised notice. My lawyer filed it this morning." She didn't take the paper. 14 days. Ray. That's the law. He smirked. The law's flexible when you've got the right friends. Behind him, the men fitted a new padlock through the latch. The sound of metal scraping metal felt louder than it should have. Cole stepped in then, voice low but sharp. "Mr. Dugan, I am Cole Whitman, CEO of Northline Capital. This property is under my corporate umbrella, and I can assure you," Ray's smirk widened. "Oh, I know who you are. Fancy suit. Big desk. You the one paying my invoices now." Cole's stomach twisted. "This eviction-'s illegal. You'll undo it, or I'll have a restraining order in your hand before sunrise." Ray's eyes glittered. "You think you scare me. Mr. Money. You bought this land through shell companies to make a parking lot. Don, play the saint now." Cole froze. The words were too close to the truth. Pastor Ruth's voice broke in over the chaos. "Officer Webb says it is a civil matter," she shouted from her phone. "He won to come unless there's violence." "Civil," Evan muttered bitterly. "Tell that to 80-year-olds standing in the cold." The temperature was 28 degrees. A biting wind funneled through the cracked lot, carrying the sharp scent of snow and diesel. One of the seniors, Mrs. Klein, the retired teacher who'd learned to FaceTime her granddaughter, was shivering. Lena slipped off her scarf and wrapped it around the woman's shoulders without breaking eye contact with Ray. "Please," she said, "let them get their things. Their laptops, their coats, the rest of their lunch." Ray checked his watch. 5 minutes. Lena stared at him. "You didn't mean that." He gave a shrug that was almost a smirk. "Time is money, sweetheart." Cole felt something hot and primal rise in his chest. He started forward, but Lena raised a hand, a silent command, and he stopped. She turned back toward the small crowd of seniors and volunteers. "Stay right here," she said gently. Then she stepped closer to Ray until only a few feet separated them. "You've got it backward," she said quietly. "Time isn't money. It is dignity." Ray frowned. "Lady, this isn't about yes. It is." Her voice sharpened. cutting clean through the wind. Those people behind me, they Ray my students. They've spent their lives working the jobs that kept this town standing. Warehouse, janitorial, clerical. And now, when they finally have time to learn something for themselves, you show up with locks and lies. The men with the drill exchanged uneasy glances. You will look at them, she said, pointing toward the seniors, as people, not as tenants, not as inconvenience. People. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the idling truck. Mrs. Klein lifted her chin. Beside her, another woman tiny, wrapped in a pink coat, stepped forward, then a third. One by one, they formed a crooked line behind Lena, their breath fogging the air like a small, defiant army. Cole watched, heart pounding. He'd seen boardroom standoffs worth millions end in silence, but nothing like this. No numbers, no contracts, just courage wearing a plain coat. Evan stepped beside his sister. If you're putting in locks, he said to Ray, you'll have to go through us first. Ray took a half step back, caught off guard by the shift. I could call security. You already did, Lena said. We called the press. That was a bluff. Cole realized it instantly, but a brilliant one. The mention of cameras made Ray S.'s jaw tighten. He muttered something to his crew. The men hesitated, drill still in hand, uncertain now. 5 minutes, Ray repeated, but it lacked conviction this time. He threw the new padlock into the toolbox and slammed it shut. You've got 5 minutes to clear out. After that, it's trespassing. Then he turned and stomped to his truck. The engine roared, exhaust belching white smoke that swallowed him as he drove off into the dusk. For a moment, no one moved. Then Mrs. Klein clutched Lena S.'s arm, whispering, Honey, that was something. Lena exhaled shakily, shoulders finally dropping. It was just words. They were the right ones, Cole said softly. The group began filing back inside to gather their things before Ray could change his mind again. Pastor Ruth lingered near the curb, tears glinting on her lashes. I thought we'd lost it, she whispered. I really thought we haven't lost anything yet, Cole said. And we Ray not going to. Evan clapped a hand on his shoulder. You sure about that? Boss man Cole looked at him, a half smile flickering. Not even a little, but I'm learning from your sister that sometimes you act before certainty catches up. They shared a brief, weary laugh before following the others inside. Later, when the building emptied again and the lights dimmed, Cole lingered in the doorway. The rink looked fragile, like something one hard wind could blow apart, but it was still standing. Lena came up beside him, coat zipped, scarf gone. Her breath trembled in the air. You didn't have to stay, she said. Yes, I did. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded toward the padlock still dangling from Ray S.'s toolbox, forgotten on the curb. He'll be back. I know, Cole said. Next time. So will I. They stood there as the last light drained from the sky, the faint hum of distant traffic, their only witness. Somewhere, a siren wailed, then faded. The cold bit at their faces, but neither moved. Because sometimes, the world only changes when enough quiet people decide not to. The next morning, the Rink S parking lot looked almost peaceful under the new snow, the kind that falls silently, as if trying to hide what happened the night before. Cole S. breath steamed in the dawn air as he carried 2 thermoses of coffee inside. The old lock hung crooked on the door frame, but Evan had jimmied it open again, just enough for the volunteers to sneak in and stay warm. Inside, the tables were littered with notebooks, folding chairs, and, strangely, a stack of yellowed envelopes sitting at the center like treasure. Mrs. Klein stood beside them, her silver hair pulled into a bun, eyes sharp behind her bifocals. I used to work reference at the Denver Public Library, she said proudly when Cole walked in. You learn to dig. Cole set down the coffee. Dig what she smiled faintly and tapped the papers. History. The envelopes were full of photocopies, old clippings, and microfilm printouts, the kind that left your fingertips smudged with ink. The headlines jumped out in faded serif fonts. Local contractor fined for unpaid taxes 2003. Commerce city businessman accused of code violations. Anonymous donations linked to zoning favoritism. Ray Dugan's name appeared in nearly all of them. Lena leaned over the table, brow furrowed. You kept these, Mrs. Klein gave a modest shrug. Never throw away a good scandal. Dear, especially when the guilty keep pretending they've reformed. Cole picked up one of the clippings. Tax liens, code violations, cash transactions with city inspectors. He has been laundering cash through bogus maintenance fees. Mrs. Klein said, "It's all public record if you know where to look. I can promise it's current, but it's a start." Evan grinned, low whistle escaping his teeth. Mrs. Klein, you're dangerous. She adjusted her glasses. I prefer effective. Lena shot Cole a look the kind that said, you see, ordinary people can move mountains, too. He smiled back, conceding the point. By noon, he was on the phone with Northline S General Counsel, his voice low but electric. We are filing for an emergency injunction, predatory lease enforcement, fraudulent ownership practices. You name it. I want it airtight. The lawyer hesitated. Cole, this is outside corporate jurisdiction. Then make it personal. Cole said, use my name. There was a pause, then a resigned sigh. That'll get attention. Good, Cole said. It has time someone paid attention. By mid-afternoon, the rink buzzed like a newsroom. The seniors sorted papers. Evan scanned receipts into an old copier. Lena typed out a summary of the findings. Even Pastor Ruth sat at the desk, lips moving silently as she reread affidavits. When Marla Jensen S. name flashed across Cole S. phone, he stepped outside into the biting cold before answering. Marla, he said, you're making waves. She replied. Her voice was all steel. You filed an injunction against a property your company owns. Cole, do you realize how that looks? Like integrity, he said simply. Like mutiny, she snapped. The board will see this as you undermining your own assets. You all burn bridges that took decades to build. Cole leaned against his car, staring out at the slanting sunlight over the rooftops. Maybe they need burning, he said. Some of them were built on bad ground. You sound like one of them now, she said bitterly. One of who? The dreamers. The bleeding hearts. You used to know better. He almost laughed. Maybe I finally do. He hung up before she could answer. The wind stung his face, but for the first time in years, the pain felt clean, like waking up. By 5:00, the Rink-S little community gathered around an old radio and a single laptop streaming the county court S docket. The motion had been filed hours ago. The hearing. Emergency status. Evan tapped the screen nervously. Any minute now. Mrs. Klein sat beside him, hands clasped like prayer. Pastor Ruth murmured actual prayers under her breath. Lena paced. Cole stood near the doorway, arms crossed, his heart pounding louder than it should. It wasn't about property or deals anymore. It was about keeping one patch of goodness from being erased. Then the notification blinked across the screen. Motion granted temporary stay of eviction pending review. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then Mrs. Klein let out a noise halfway between a gasp and a laugh. Pastor Ruth clapped both hands over her mouth. Evan slammed his palm on the table. We did it. Lena froze, blinking at the words. It's real. Cole nodded. It's real. She exhaled, shoulders shaking, eyes bright with disbelief. They can touch this place, Pastor Ruth said, voice trembling. Not for at least 30 days. Lena turned toward the door, then let S open it. Twilight settled over the parking lot as they gathered outside. Ray S' new padlock still gleamed, taunting them. Cole reached into his pocket and held up the folded court order. Judge Matthews signed it. You want to do the honors. Lena hesitated, then took the paper. Her hands were steady now. Evan, he grinned, already producing a pair of bolt cutters from his truck. Been waiting all day. The crowd laughed a low, rippling sound that felt like the first breath after a long illness. The steel snapped. The lock fell. The sound rang out sharp and clean into the cold evening air. Lena pushed the door open. The hinges creaked like they hadn't in years. One by one. The students walked in, Mrs. Klein first, then the others, carrying their coats, notebooks, and thermoses. Someone flipped a switch, and the overhead lights flickered on, humming back to life. The glow spread slowly across the old rink floor, revealing the folding tables, the scuffed lines of the basketball court beneath, the faint echo of laughter waiting to return. It felt, Cole thought, like a candlelight service, quiet, reverent, full of small miracles. Lena stood in the doorway, last, the cold wind tugging at her hair. "They came back," she whispered. "They never really left," Cole said softly. She turned to him, eyes glistening. "Neither did you." He smiled. "Not this time." They stepped inside together, the door closing behind them with a satisfying click. The rink hummed alive, the faint whir of laptops booting up, the shuffle of chairs, the murmur of voices like prayer. Outside, the snow began again, slow and forgiving, erasing the footprints that led to the door. The rink was warmer now. The old heaters hummed steady, and the air smelled faintly of cinnamon and lemon polish. Outside, March snow melted into gray puddles, but inside, laughter returned in small, cautious doses. It was cleanup night. Cole was stacking folding chairs when Lena called from the back closet. "Hey, can you give me a hand?" He brushed off his hands and walked toward her voice. The closet was narrow, lined with mismatched boxes and old coats. Lena knelt on the floor, surrounded by dust motes shimmering in the beam of a single hanging bulb. She looked up at him, holding a shoebox labeled Donations 2017 in faded Sharpie. "It is mostly junk," she said, smiling faintly. "But I think Mrs. Talbot kept everything she ever touched." Cole chuckled. "Sounds like a woman who believed in receipts." Lena lifted out a stack of postcards, a few volunteer rosters, and a small envelope wedged at the bottom. It was yellowed, still sealed, a little bent at the corners. Her smile faded as she read the addressee. "Margaret Whitman," she whispered. "Denver Museum of Modern Art. Dated 6 years ago." Cole's heart stuttered. The name his wife S hung between them like a sudden change in air pressure. Lena S' eyes flicked to him. "She was your," he nodded slowly. "My wife, before she passed." For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the heater filled the space, a sound too gentle for what this moment demanded. "I don't understand," he said quietly. Why would something here be addressed to her? Lena turned the envelope over. The flap had been sealed but never mailed, a single forever stamp still unmarked. Her fingers trembled as she slid a nail under the edge and peeled it open. Inside was a single sheet of stationery, creased from years of being folded. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, slanted, neat, familiar. Her lips parted as she began to read silently. Then she stopped. "Maybe you should know," Cole said softly. "Go ahead." Her voice was unsteady at first. "Dear Margaret, you don't know me. My name is Lena Brooks. I am writing because I read your post about caring for your husband through chemo, the one about the yellow blanket and the coffee that went cold on the nightstand. My brother, Evan, came home from surgery last week. Not cancer, something else, but he is in pain. And I didn't know how to make it better. Your words helped. You said healing isn't about fixing people. It's about keeping the room warm enough so they didn't feel alone in it. So I did that. I made banana bread at 4 a.m. because your blog said the smell of baking helps a house breathe again. It worked. Thank you for reminding me that kindness doesn't need an audience. If you ever wonder whether your writing mattered to someone, it did. It kept a stranger going on a night when the world felt too heavy to hold, with love and a recipe for hard days. Lena stopped reading, eyes glistening. I must have left it here before mailing. I was too embarrassed. I guess. Thought it sounded silly. Cole reached for the letter, his hands trembling as he took it from her. The paper was thin, soft from age. He could still see the faint blue ink from his wife's old blog printed at the top corner every day. Find one small thing that still tastes sweet. He read the words again, silently this time, until they blurred. His throat closed. She would be loved this, he whispered. She wrote that blog when she could barely lift her hands. Said if she couldn't heal herself, maybe she could make someone else less afraid. Lena watched him, tears slipping down her cheeks. She did. Cole laughed softly. A fragile, breaking sound. All this time, I thought the world forgot her after the funeral, but you were out here reading, baking banana bread at 4 in the morning, keeping her kindness alive without even knowing her name. He pressed a hand to his eyes, trying to steady his breathing. The ache wasn't as sharp like grief used to be. It was round, full, almost holy. Lena knelt beside him. "I never told you," she said quietly. "But that's why I started volunteering. Because someone I'd never met told me that love outlives the body it came from. I just didn't know it was your someone." He looked at her then. Really looked. The flickering light caught the gold strands in her hair, the exhaustion in her eyes, and something tender and fierce inside him cracked open. "Maybe," he said softly. "That's what grace really is, two lives that almost missed each other, finding the same story from opposite sides." She nodded, tears slipping freely now. Maybe it is just love finishing what it started. He unfolded the letter again, smoothing the creases with his palm. His wife's name, her handwriting, the faint smudge of Lena's pen, all of it felt impossibly connected, like threads that had been crossing in silence for years. He read one line again, aloud this time, his voice breaking on it. It kept a stranger going on a night when the world felt too heavy to hold. The words trembled out of him, barely sound, but enough. He sat back against the wall, the letter resting in his lap. His shoulders began to shake, not violently, just a slow, quiet release that had been waiting far too long. Lena didn't speak. She simply sat beside him, her arm close but not touching. The warmth between them was enough. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wet but clear. "Thank you," he said, "for finding her again for me." Lena smiled through her tears. "You found her. I just opened a box." The heater clicked off, and the room fell into stillness, the kind that doesn't demand anything, just lets the moment breathe. Cole folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and held it for a long time before whispering, "I think I'll mail it anyway." To where Lena asked gently, he smiled faintly, "Doesn't matter. Some letters aren't meant to arrive. They're meant to remind us still writing." She nodded, eyes shimmering. Outside, wind swept against the windows, carrying the faint scent of snow and something sweeter banana bread. Maybe from the oven warming in the break room. It was the smell of memory learning how to be mercy. Spring arrived like a hesitant apology, snow melting slow, crocuses daring to bloom between cracks in the parking lot asphalt. Inside the rink, the air smelled of coffee and new paint. Laughter, once a rare visitor, now came freely again, echoing against the rafters. Cole stood near the glass doors, holding a folder marked "Final Transfer of Assets." It had taken weeks of legal wrangling, late-night phone calls, and one board meeting that ended with him walking out before the vote even finished. He'd expected fury. He got silence. Marla's voice had followed him down the corridor that night. "You'll ruin your standing, Cole. Once you give this away, you'll never get it back." He hadn't stopped walking, and maybe that's the point. Now, as sunlight spread across the rink floor, he handed the folder to Pastor Ruth, who blinked at the stack of notarized papers inside. "I don't understand," she said softly. "It's official," Cole said. "Northline has divested from Pine River Holdings. The rink's land deed is now held under a new non-profit charter, Northline Night School. You and the board have full operational control." Pastor Ruth's hands trembled. "You mean this belongs to the community?" He nodded. "Entirely. Independent board. Transparent funding. I'll still support the program through a grant. But it's yours now." Lena stood a few feet away, watching him with quiet astonishment. "You really did it. I told you I would," he said with a small smile, "though my PR team might not send me flowers anytime soon." She tilted her head. "You all survive. You've got good lawyers and better coffee." He laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in years. Evan leaned against the doorway, cane tapping rhythmically on the floor. "He's learning," he said, slowly. "But learning." Pastor Ruth pressed a hand over her heart. Mr. Whitman Cole, this place has seen miracles. But this, she shook her head. Too moved for words. Donna, thank me, he said. Thank the woman who taught me what quiet courage looks like. He turned to Lena. She flushed, half embarrassed, half touched. I'd like you to serve as program director, Cole said. You've earned it. Lena froze. Director, no. No. That's not me. It's exactly you, he said gently. She crossed her arms, the hint of a smile tugging at her lips. How about operations lead? Titles make people behave weirdly. I'd rather keep the weird to a minimum. Evan chuckled, spoken like a true boss. Lena ignored him. If I am leading, it has to be with a board local people. Mrs. Klein, Pastor Ruth, maybe Evan if he promises not to sass too much. The community decides the budget, not donors. Cole nodded. Done. She blinked. That easy. He smiled. Power-s lighter when you stop clutching it. Her eyes softened, and for a heartbeat, the air between them hummed with something that didn't need words. Respect, admiration, maybe something gentler growing beneath. That evening, they held the first official class under the new charter. The rink glowed with soft yellow light. The walls were patched and freshly painted, a warm cream. A banner, hand-painted by the students, hung above the door. Welcome back. This is our place. Mrs. Klein arrived early, setting out thermoses of cocoa on the refreshment table. Pastor Ruth rearranged chairs in neat circles. Volunteers unboxed donated laptops, 17 of them, silver lids gleaming like small mirrors of hope. Lena moved through it all with calm precision, sleeves rolled, clipboard in hand. Check the Wi-Fi range, she called to Evan. If it cuts out again, I am stealing the router from your apartment. He saluted her with mock gravity. Ma am. Yes, ma am. His cane tapped a steady rhythm as he walked the perimeter, each step firm, sure a metronome of hope. Cole stood near the coffee urn, sleeves rolled up, handing out mugs. Only decaf tonight, he announced. Dr. S. orders. Groans rose from the crowd, laughter following right after. When class started, Lena stood at the front, a soft smile on her face. Some of you were here the night the locks went on. Some came after. Either way, tonight isn't about what we lost, it's about what we built back together. She glanced toward Cole, who gave a small nod, encouraging her on. This program began with a handful of laptops and a stubborn belief that learning doesn't expire at 60. She said, now we've got 17 computers, 30 students, 5 volunteers, and a lawyer who actually smiles sometimes. The room laughed again, but her voice grew steadier, deeper. None of this would exist without one man deciding to be rich in a different way. Cole felt heat rise in his face. Lena, she lifted a hand. Let me finish. Money can buy walls, but character builds doors. You open one for us. For that, thank you. He looked around the room, the glow of screens, the hum of conversation, the scent of cocoa, the sound of keys tapping in uncertain rhythm, of laughter mingling with learning. It was messy, human, perfect. This, he thought, was the wealth that mattered. When class ended, the students lingered, reluctant to leave. Mrs. Klein hugged Lena, whispering something about banana bread for next week. Pastor Ruth stacked chairs with a song under her breath. Cole walked toward the door, watching as Lena turned off the lights one by one. You sure about the non-profit setup, she asked, falling into step beside him. I am sure, he said. For the first time in a long time, I am not measuring life in quarterly returns. What are you measuring it in now? He smiled. Good coffee and good company. Not a bad metric, she said softly. They paused at the doorway. The last students were leaving, their laughter trailing into the night. Lena looked back once more, eyes shining. We did something good here. No, he said gently. You did. She shook her head. No one does anything alone. Cole, not really. The words lingered between them, simple and true. Outside, the air was cool and alive. Evan waited by his truck, cane resting against the door, grinning like a man who'd finally stopped looking over his shoulder. "Come on, you two," he called. "We are locking up, not moving in." Lena smiled. "You coming?" Boss Cole looked at the glowing rink one last time. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I am right behind you." He turned off the last light, the kind of darkness that doesn't erase it holds. The clock above the rink door clicked softly to 5 o'clock. Once, that sound had marked endings chairs stacked, lights dimmed, engines starting in the parking lot below. 5 o'clock used to mean emptiness, the sigh of a building exhaling its last bit of life for the day. Not anymore. Now, 5 o'clock was the start of something, a rhythm. The low hum of laptops booting up, the gentle scuff of boots on the polished floor, the air rich with the scent of cocoa and fresh bread cooling on folding tables. Cole leaned against the doorframe, watching the students trickle in through the dusk. Mrs. Klein waved as she passed, clutching her laptop like it was gold. Behind her came Evan, balancing a tray of coffee mugs, his cane tapping time. The sounds folded into one another, life layered over routine, music where there used to be silence. Lena walked past him, cheeks flushed from the cold, a knit scarf looped twice around her neck. She carried a brown paper bag with careful hands. "Still warm," she said, nodding toward the bag. "Let me guess," he replied. "Banana bread." She grinned. "Improved version. Added walnuts this time." He smiled. "Your quality control is ruthless." "You're welcome," she said, brushing a dusting of snow off her sleeve. "Someone has got to keep standards around here." He laughed softly, shaking his head. The sound settled into the room like a small light. The class was already underway. Seniors bent close to screens, squinting, clicking, whispering to one another with the giddy confusion of discovery. A man in his 70s raised both hands in triumph as his granddaughter's face appeared on the monitor. "There she is!" he shouted. The room erupted in applause. Lena smiled, moving from table to table, her voice gentle, patient. Cole stayed back, content just to watch. It was the same way he used to watch the stock ticker years ago, except now. The stakes felt real. Every smile was a gain that couldn't be measured in numbers. When the session ended, they stacked chairs in quiet rhythm. The snow outside fell thick and slow, soft against the glass. A few students lingered, waving their goodbyes, reluctant to step into the cold. One by one, the doors clicked shut until it was just the two of them. Lena wiped her hands on a towel and looked around. "You ever notice," she said, "how buildings remember things? You can almost hear what they used to sound like." He nodded. "And sometimes, if you're lucky, you can help them learn a new song." She smiled at that. "I like that." He reached for a chair. She reached for the same one. Their fingers brushed not a spark, not a jolt, just warmth, familiar, steady. For a moment, they stood there, hands resting on the same chair, neither pulling away. "I used to think 5 o'clock was the loneliest part of the day," she said quietly. "Now it's just my favorite, because the lights stay on, because I don't dread what comes after." He looked at her, the soft gold of the fluorescent lights catching the edge of her smile. "You did all this, Lena." She shook her head. "No, we did." He chuckled, low and tender. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." She reached into the paper bag and tore a piece of banana bread in half, handing him one piece. "Eat before it gets cold." He took it, the steam rising between them. The first bite was sweet, nutty, warm, the taste of comfort disguised as something ordinary. They didn't talk much after that. They didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't the old kind, not the awkward, aching quiet of distance, but the stillness of two people who'd finally stopped pretending they had to fill every space with words. Outside, the snow thickened, blanketing the parking lot in silver. Streetlights blinked on, halos glowing in the mist. Cole turned off the last overhead switch, leaving the rink lit only by the strands of white bulbs Lena had strung across the beams weeks ago. Their light shimmered faintly on the ice that had long since melted, on the floor scuffed by learning and laughter. "Looks different, doesn't it?" he said. She nodded, her voice soft. "Feels different, ours too." He glanced at her, about to speak, but she reached out first. Her fingers slipped into his, simple as breathing. No declarations, no surprise, just choice. He squeezed her hand gently. A quiet answer. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the pull of unfinished work or the weight of loss waiting at home. Just the hum of the heater, the smell of bread, the woman beside him, and a building that finally believed it deserved light. They stood there for a long time, listening to the snow. If someone had been walking past outside just then, they might have seen the glow through the frosted glass, two silhouettes, close but unhurried, framed by strands of light. Inside, a screen still glowed where an older woman had forgotten to log out. Her cursor blinked beside one word on the page, "Join." And somewhere in that small, unfinished word was everything that mattered, the quiet courage to reach out, to stay, to keep the lights on even when the world told you it was time to go home. Love wasn't allowed here. It was chosen, and it stayed. Sometimes, healing begins where we least expect it, in small rooms with flickering lights, or in the quiet company of someone who finally sees us. This story isn't about grand gestures or perfect people. It is about the quiet ones, the ones who keep showing up, who teach, who listen, who love without needing applause. Lena and Cole found each other not through destiny, but through the gentle work of paying attention. We spend so much of life chasing what shines, forgetting that real light often comes from those who refuse to give up when no one's watching. Love, it turns out, isn't always loud or certain. Sometimes it's just a steady hand, a warm slice of bread, a conversation that softens the dark. And maybe that's enough to keep the lights on for one another. A little longer each day. Thank you for being here with us. For every minute you've spent listening. For every tear, every quiet smile, it means more than you know. At Shining Stories, we believe kindness can travel farther than sound. And sometimes, a simple story can make the world feel a little softer. Every like, share, and subscribe helps us keep the lights on, not just in this channel, but in the hearts of those who still believe in gentle things. So thank you, truly, Yusain, for helping us tell stories that touch the soul. Until next time, stay kind and keep shining.